always bring the food guy up right before lunch, so just bear with me while you're hungry. If you don't know about the Media Lab, it's important to know where I come from because it changes the way that I think. So the Media Lab on campus, our director calls it the place for the anti-discipline. The founder calls it the home of intellectual misfits. And I think everyone questions if we have any discipline at all. Because we develop things like robots, new cars, new toys, new prosthetics, new synthetic biology, and I work on food. If you haven't taken a look at the world of food lately, let's do it in like 6 seconds. So this is the percentage of the world that's considered food secure, which means it produces enough food within its national boundary to feed its domestic population. This is the percentage of the world that's food insecure, varying degrees of food insecure, but it's not this simple. The countries in purple are both food insecure and producing food for other countries to feed their domestic populations. Overlay that with the results of the Industrial Revolution, cars, planes, trains, and automobiles, and this is what your global farm looks like today. It's manifested in a lot of ways to us recently. If I asked you to tell me what food crisis was, you'd likely have a myriad of different answers. Not enough food, too much food, agricultural runoff creating algal blooms, not enough water, GMO saving the world, GMO being the blight of the world, farmers' land rights, that land was taken from rainforests, pollution, nutrition attenuation, it goes on. And I think it's very disempowering to just look at all of these problems and not try to create a simple solution. So I focus on simple, small things. We've all probably eaten an apple in the last week. How old do you think that apple was from the date it was picked in the average grocery store? 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 14 months. The average age of an apple in a grocery store in the United States is 14 months because they're picked, they're waxed, they're placed in cold storage. The cold storage is drawn down with CO2 and O2 so that we can aesthetically freeze the apple. This was magnificent in fulfilling the prophecy that we should all have an apple a day. The thing we realized in building this system now is all of the antioxidants, by the time we get this apple, are gone. It's basically a little ball of sugar and cellulose fiber. So one of the biggest problems in food is that we're just too big. The second one, this is a study by the USDA and FDA that I love. So in the United States, what would we support or oppose in government policy? The first one's highly debated, you've probably heard about it, a tax on sugared soda. 40% of people would support it, 60% of people wouldn't support it. People don't like to be told what to do even if it's good for them. The crazy one is the control question they threw in. About halfway down, you'll see mandatory label on food containing DNA. I knew it was an audience of teachers. Like, I've had audiences where people didn't laugh. 80% of the American population would support mandatory labeling of food containing DNA. Gluten-free, organic, contains DNA on the radar. So the other biggest problem in food is that we're all generally ignorant about what food is, where it comes from. So this is the kind of premise of my work. What we need is an open platform to be able to ask questions and share solutions and answers. I mean, I don't know what questions get asked on Twitter and Facebook and answered, but it's a pretty good way of getting people to talk to each other. If we had such a platform, what might we ask? And this is the focus of my work. In the next 30 years, what if climate was democratic? And what I mean is this is a map of all of the beneficial agricultural climates in the world, the best in green, the worst in red. Currently, we are slave to climate. Californian farmers become Mexican farmers. China is now the largest landholder in Brazil. All of the food coming for the Middle East comes from African farms. What if each country could have its own beneficial climate? And I'll show you what I mean. The last one's also super serious, and the video's not playing, but I'll bet a bunch of you have watched this before, so you'll get it. In a world of data that we live in now, couldn't we just zap food, somehow particleize it, send it through the air, and reconstitute it on the other side, eliminating shipping, eliminating nutrition loss, the crazy adolescent apples? Could this be possible? The third one, pretty relevant to this audience. We talk a lot about 2050 and how many people are going to be here, blah, blah, blah. What are they going to do? What if 1 billion people in the next generation were farmers? I was inspired to do this when I went to Japan. And I landed in Fukushima after the disaster. And a lot of environmental contamination, but in addition to that, the youth had left for Sendai and Tokyo a long time ago for tech jobs. This is not unique to Japan. Less than 2% of the American population is directly involved in the production of food. Half of the population of Africa, under 18, 80% of them don't want to be farmers because life's hard as a farmer. In India, more farmer suicides in the last 3 years than in the previous 10. The average age of a global farmer, 58. So how could we produce 1 billion more farmers? We've seen movements like this before. Coder movement, access to open hardware, general public license. Maker movement, which we're kind of in the middle, access to open hardware. Network movement, network economy, Uber, Lyft, all these guys. It's very clear to us in the Media Lab, a place known for digital life, that the next movement is biology, and it is the digitization and being able to use digital tools in the future of food. So we started developing these. When I landed back from Fukushima, I went to Home Depot and Bed Bath & Beyond and started breaking things and using Dixie cups to kill plants mostly. And got to this kind of point 4 or 5 years ago, and they were like, oh, you could put it in Bed Bath & Beyond and $59.99. And I was like, this is never going to produce much food. So I took the work and I started scaling it up to another video that doesn't want to play. And inside of this 60 square feet, it's cool because there's all this technology, and we could talk about that, but even more cool, we had a harvest once a month. Bright white roots, deep green colors. And the first time anyone in the Media Lab ever ripped the roots off of anything. A place full of roboticists, algorithm developers, software developers, hardware hackers, now starting to think about the future of food. When we would have these harvests, if you had some left, you would take it back to the farm because if you grow it, you're kind of proud of it. And the next day, it would taste hyper sweet. In one day, lettuce that tastes normal, lettuce that tastes candied. Of course, I yelled at my students, and I said, who put sugar in the water, right? And we started doing all of this analysis. This is just a simple analysis of water. And what I learned was very old. Plants under stress produce biochemical defense. That plant was like, I'm not going to die because you took me out of my environment. That induced drought state changed the chemical composition of the plant within a few hours, and it tasted sweeter to me. So it was at that point that we learned coding climate meant coding flavor. And we knew that a lot more people needed to know about this. So we built a box on the facade of the Media Lab with another movie that's not playing. What's going on here? So it's awesome, I swear. Inside of this, you can see it glowing. If you know about the genome and genetics, this is the phenome, or phenomics. Inside of the box, we have 30 points of networked sensing, things like CO2, O2, temperature, humidity, light. We are designing recipes that correlate to better nutrition, better flavor, different shapes, different colors. All of that is governed. That's why people say, oh, I love the strawberries in Mexico. It's like, no, you don't. You love the strawberry from the climate that produces the expressions of the things that you like. So if we put Mexico in a box, you get Mexican strawberries. Inside of this, we're experimenting with a lot of things. This is a process where we use no standing water, no soil, called aeroponics, derivative of NASA's work for Mir space station. We're using about 90% less water. Roots at this level are pretty simple: oxygen, water, and minerals. We get about 5 times the growth speed. We've gone a long time and now producing technology in seed for an adverse world. You can debate whether you like it or not. We have not really looked at perfect world. If the world were perfect, what would be possible? Future possibilities in this world: this tomato came from an ancient and rare seed bank. This tomato hasn't been in commercial production for 150 years. I am the only person in this audience that has eaten this tomato. Be jealous. It was supposed to be the best sauce tomato in the world. Unfortunately, I can't cook, so we ate it raw, which was not so good. But we have access to a diversity of germplasm that has never been tapped because these things were not selected just based on industrial processing and the requirements of that. We created an interface for these farms. What you're looking at right now, it's running a recipe called resource efficient. It's been optimized for something, water use, energy use, whatever you want. We're tracking the plants and how they're doing. If you see that line that cuts across all the other crazy ones, that's the recipe. That's Napa Valley 1982. All those little noisy ones are all the different sensor values trying to create that recipe. And we're working a lot now to try to get those sensor values to match these lines. We correlate all that to a page. So this is this plant's page. You can see something like new leaf added today, because we're using a camera to do edge detection of the plant to know when events occur. We're cataloging everything. All the other plants on the other side, in the farm with them, they're friends, right? Companion planting. It's been studied, peas love carrots, whatever. We're looking at exactly why. Why? More nitrogen, more phosphorus, more potassium, more calcium. People are like, but where's the dirt? You have no soul. Dirt's awesome, soil's better, and what soil has is nutrients, as does this water. There are no chemical fertilizers, no pesticides at all in the farm. So all these things being tracked. So you can imagine for a chemistry class, a lot more interesting to learn about these things when they're being actually used. Obviously, a whole microbiome of life inside of the root system. So we took the plant very simply, cultured it all the way up. These Petri dishes represent the basil as it goes vertically. You can see at the top, at the leaf, it's basically sterile. But at the bottom, at the roots, it's nuts. There's so many different bacteria, there's so many different microbes acting together to produce those flavors. So we culture and sequence the water, which is pretty cheap now, and we produce more data. We then take that plant forward, because what it turns out might sound scary, but everything you like about a plant is biochemical. So flavor is biochemical. When you stress that plant, it changes its profile. So we take this forward, the tissue forward with gas chromatograph, and do an analysis. What did we do? What did we get? And then we optimize. We also do things with image-based processing. So what you're looking at here is the farm being imaged, the things on the side. It's actually relatively simple. This was done by our open source community, not by us. They're tracking when does a new leaf come on board, why, what biomass is available, at what time, what conditions were present when the thing changed. We started growing human beings. Seriously, I got a haircut like 3 days ago or I would look like that. It's like MIT standard issue. Our units were like $100,000. We didn't think that was going to scale very well. So we started building a smaller one to investigate this. We iterated on it, and we created something we call the personal food computer. If you know 3D printing early days, this is like the rep rap, the ugly junkyard dog of 3D printing that everyone worked on together. We took this thing forward and we dropped it off in schools. Well, first we open sourced it. So another magical video that's not going to play. It's awesome too. We show you how to build it. And a video that plays. Okay, so this is the interface that we dropped off in schools. They have the digital environment, they have the sensors, and they have ability to create change. They load a recipe that some other kid has grown, put in a digital plant, put in a physical plant. Then they have questions. You're all teachers, so I don't have to tell you how humbled I was when I tried to teach something to a kid. I was like, set it to 65% humidity. And the 8th grader said, what's humidity? I said, well, it's water and air. And he said, you're an idiot, there's no water and air. Fair enough. I said, set it to 100, it starts to mist, it starts to condense and create a fog and drip. And he was like, oh, humidity is rain. Why didn't you just tell me that? They download all of these data sets, they look at anything they want, they take it forward from a completely data-driven perspective to make their own unique conclusions. We've gone across disciplines, across grade levels. This is a group of our first graders. They were just learning to measure. And while they were learning to measure with a ruler, and the plants change every day, so it's kind of fun, they were blowing in the food computer. Then the CO2 level went up. And then they got enamorated, and they were like blowing into this food computer one after the other, not very sanitary, but they got the parts per million of CO2 up into the food computer like 5,000, which was pretty amazing. The data from the first graders went forward to the 8th graders, and then they started modeling the growth of the plants. In another one of our classes, see if it goes forward. Another one of our classes, the teacher was teaching environmental science. Remind you that I put this thing in a classroom expecting like worst case scenario it was the new hamster and like may die. So we put this in there, we didn't tell them what to do. One of our teachers took climate data from the Farmer's Almanac from 50 years ago and rebuilt the climate of the past. And then spent the semester's lessons plans creating the climate of the future and growing in it. And then creating several climates of the future to see which ones were the best. Imagine a kid's change in thought when it's like, climate change, oh my gosh, it's happening, I hope Obama fixes it, to I create climates, I actuate them, and I understand them. Another one of our classes, purely focused on chemistry. This is an interesting chemistry problem. What do plants need to survive? How? What are the minerals? How do they get taken out? How do we add more? Where do we get these minerals from? Another class, just on the hardware. Didn't care about growing, didn't care about anything, like just hacking Raspberry Pi and Arduino to do basic functions like turn lights off, turn lights on humidifiers, turn on whatever they wanted, and share the code. This is the growth in 3 weeks' time in a food computer. And the point of this is, it's not boring. Like watching plants grow, watching paint dry, like can be kind of rough to get engagements, I'm sure. This is something that they can get into while they're at home. We've had the request to create spy mode, where they can spy on the other schools. They then requested sabotage mode, and maybe someday. We're quite clear that this is not the farmer of the future, and that the farmer of the future looks a heck of a lot more like this. It's going to be about resource efficiency, about out-of-field knowledge, electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, computer science, data science, flavor chemistry, plant science, plant morphology, all of these disciplines involved. And in fact, future farmers live on Earth. This was a student that, when I talked to him about farming, he was like, oh my God, will this guy just please stop? Through the process and watching these things change and nurturing them, he's created a passion about farming. Other students in his class have showed up at Media Lab. They started using Instructables and Thingiverse to create solar panels for their food computer, to create robotic arms. It's not very far to reach in, I don't know why, but whatever. Like, each one of those mods then gets shared with the other school, and it started to act sort of like curriculum. If you don't know, these things exist on Earth, right? This is in Canada. Exist for a lot of the reasons that I was telling you about. They're growing lettuce. If you wondered what happened to old floppy disk factories, it's true. Japan has over 400 hectares of this under cultivation. A hectare, by the way, is big. This is a lettuce factory that produces 1 million heads of lettuce a week, 365 days a year, and is sold in the market for 3 times the price because it's safe. We enjoy a different perspective on food in the United States than a lot of other places, and in these places, they've seen their children hurt, their babies die. They've seen malnutrition have brain stunting effects. So when you can say that this product is nutritious, is safe, and that you can tell them everything about it, it really changes the game. This one's kind of crazy. So everybody thinks about lettuces and herbs and tomatoes. This is a DARPA facility doing the exact same thing that we're doing, growing Ebola vaccine. So this is a plant that's been inoculated with the tobacco mosaic virus in a very specific environment to produce an Ebola-resistant protein. They take that protein forward and they make a vaccine. Everything that we care about from medicinal uses comes from plants. We create then a synthetic and we create then a pharmaceutical. But the world is changing. Back to natural derivatives, back to natural pharmaceuticals, back to nutraceuticals, cosmetics, by the way. Anyone that's wearing cosmetics in the audience likely came from a plant. So it's a huge range of things that we're starting to explore this way. So, into the world, what we call the personal food computer. This is a concept model that we've been working on. We will launch 100 units in the next 6 months in 50 schools across a number of different grades. The food server, it feels like to me that I'm that guy plugging holes in a dam right now. It's ugly, it's weird, but it's just like the 1950s, 60s, 70s of computing. So many people getting online, exploring, and then building crazy things. Awesome to announce, we're building the first open source vertical farm in the world now, together with a bunch of partners. All of the data comes off of this. You can take it forward for energy, water. You know, I don't want to say this is how we're going to solve some crisis. I just want to say this is what it can do, and this is how you can get involved. It all runs on what we call the open phenome. If you know the open genome and how much it's fundamentally advanced science, it was billions of dollars. It was 10,000 researchers coming together. Now imagine taking that across just 10,000 varieties of tomatoes, let alone everything else in the world. But this is the data that tells us how to then optimize to use less resources, to use less chemicals, to use less whatever it is, to produce actually better nutrition. Amazing thing is, until recently, we hadn't created a single GMO in the world for nutrition or flavor. It's for pest resistance and chemical resistance and drought tolerance. So as we learn more nuanced perspectives from this work, we'll be able to influence agriculture all over the world. To do this, we need people. We need homies. So as I said, everything is open source, but then we recently launched a community on a website called Discourse. It's only been 2 months that this community's been active, but in 2 months, we now have, I think this graph is old, it's something like 350 people contributing, people that we don't know, that we don't talk to, that the only language we share in common is code. So this is the world I showed you earlier, connected by strings, and this is what's changing. And this is what many of your students will be a part of, as well as yourselves. It'll start looking a lot less like strings, and it'll start looking a lot more like beacons. Emailing basil, emailing tomatoes. Not just tomatoes, but the best tomato from Italy with the best flavor so that you can make your neighbor jealous. And in fact, this isn't just my grand dream, and then people are like, oh, this guy's crazy. In the last 2 months, we are in 20 countries on 6 continents, all open source, and it ranges from researchers, scientists, students, hackers, makers, teachers, the gamut. Flavor chemists, all working together to create this data, to upload this data and then be able to pull it back down and create better food. I'll close with this. The future of educating around food, and I would say technology, is not about talking about what's wrong with this. And that's the dialogue that everybody hears constantly, and it's depressing. Future is not saying, oh, you should just like organic, you should just like synthetic, oh, GMO, it's the best. GMO, no, it's horrible. It's not about camping and creating divisive groups that don't push the solution forward. It's about getting together on one platform and networking the next 1 billion farmers to simply ask the question, what if? Thank you.